Member for Castries South.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that the following motion in my name. I beg to move the following motion in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 40, subsection 1 of the Citizenship by Investment Act number 14 of 2015, for the Minister's responsibility for the Citizenship by Investment Program, following approval by the Cabinet of Ministers, to effect certain changes to the Act. Section 40, subsection 3 requires that such changes be subject to a negative resolution. And whereas the changes to the regulations became effective on 20th April 2019, and whereas Statutory Instrument 2019 number 48 was tabled in the House of Assembly on 11th June 2019, and whereas in my view the changes made by the Minister serve to undermine the integrity and reputation of the Citizenship by Investment Program, be it resolved that Parliament, by negative resolution, approve that Regulation 2 and Regulation 10, provided by Statutory Instrument 2015 number 89, be hereby reinstated. Mr. Speaker, just over 2 years ago, we debated a similar motion to negate the changes which this government had made to the CIP regulations. Mr. Speaker, the negative resolution offers us an opportunity for us to come to this House and force a debate on the CIP. And you would notice, that it is unique. It is not an affirmative resolution. And the former Prime Minister was very deliberate in ensuring that the legislation on the CIP would allow for changes to the regulation to be done through a negative resolution. It's not usual, Mr. Speaker, but it was done deliberately, Mr. Speaker. It was done deliberately because, Mr. Speaker, the Citizenship by Investment Program is a very sensitive program. The CIP is a sensitive matter, Mr. Speaker. And that recognition by the former Prime Minister was also reflected in the way in which the CIP was designed under the previous administration, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the CIP was launched in January 2016. January 2016. The first applications were received in around March, April 2016. Elections were in June 2016. It did not have a chance, Mr. Speaker, to take off, Mr. Speaker. And I want you to listen to me carefully, because the program was designed, Mr. Speaker, to be a rigid and robust program, Mr. Speaker. A rigid and robust program. It was designed to be an exclusive program, Mr. Speaker. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, and members on the other side, some of them cannot understand that concept. It had to have comprehensive due diligence. Comprehensive due diligence. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, parliamentary oversight. So the program was designed, Mr. Speaker, and sold to the world, not as the cheapest program, not as a program where you can get citizenship at the easiest manner, but a program that was exclusive, that had integrity, that had, Mr. Speaker, a reputation of a program that one would want to be part of. The present Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, was a critic of the program under the Senusha Labour Party. Of course, you recall the personal attacks on me as chairman. And, Mr. Speaker, I smile now at those attacks, Mr. Speaker, because the chicken is coming home, coming to roost, Mr. Speaker. And very shortly, Mr. Speaker, a lot will be said, Mr. Speaker. A lot will be said about all those attacks, Mr. Speaker. And I'm smiling, Mr. Speaker. But you would recall one of the arguments was, Mr. Speaker, that I was chairman and I was a political aspirant. And a chairman of a major corporation should not be somebody who intends to contest elections. But you know the largest corporation in St. Lucia, Statutory Corporation, has a chairman who is actively campaigning all over my stomping ground, Mr. Speaker. And it is allowed. And a corporation where one of the councillors has sued the chairman, the mayor, for corruption. Somebody from his own party, one of his councillors has sued him, but you heard nothing. I think he's called your lordship, the mayor. Mr. Morris, I think. One of his councillors, a UWP councillor.
Honourable member.
So, Mr. Speaker, yeah, well done. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister in all of that said he was going to reform the CIP and make it the wonder of the universe. That he was an expert on CIP, and he was going to take this CIP that the Labour Party designed and implemented, which had not really taken off. It was in its very early stages. And he was going to make it the feature of the CIP industry. And on January the 5th, Mr. Speaker, 2017, the government announced changes to the regulations. Announced changes to the regulations. And we stood in this house and we said to the Prime Minister, do not make those changes. You are going to destroy St. Lucia's reputation, and you are going to destroy the standing of the CIP. There were 3 fundamental provisions which were removed over the course of months, Mr. Speaker. We had a high net worth requirement, Mr. Speaker, for you to become a citizen of St. Lucia. That was removed. We said we were limiting by law no more than 500 citizens. That was removed. And we ensured the donation level was high enough that only people of a certain standing, a certain financial capacity, can become citizens of St. Lucia through the program. In a sense, we were ring-fencing the threat to our security and preserving our image. But according to the philosophy of this government, our integrity, our reputation, our security is determined by our credit rating. And it was pronounced by our Prime Minister in a global forum that it is not patrimony that really matters, but your credit rating. But once that announcement had been made and those changes were made to the CIP, what we witnessed was a wanton abandonment of caution and regard for the image of our country. Let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, what happened in the citizenship and investment industry out there after St. Lucia made those changes. All of a sudden, what was seen as a gold standard program, it started to be seen, and remember, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying to you, it was designed, it was marketed, and it was promoted. And interest was already buzzing about St. Lucia. But hey, what happened instead, Mr. Speaker? Hey, Mr. Speaker, the irritant has started. But Mr. Speaker, the first thing that was said about St. Lucia, all of a sudden, was that St. Lucia is no longer an exclusive program. It's not exclusive. It's no longer a discriminating program. By saying to the world we were only accepting $500 a year at a minimum net worth of $3 million and a high donation level, we were saying we wanted the very best of persons who wanted economic citizenship. We were seen as a cheap option. In fact, the Prime Minister boasted that we now as cheap as Dominica. So you want to excite people to become citizens of your country, but you've reduced the level at which they can qualify, and you boast to the world, St. Lucia is now the cheapest. Come to St. Lucia. And somehow or the other, it is believed that that would work. Persons were saying that all St. Lucia cares about now is making money out of the program. And there's less emphasis on attracting worthy individuals to St. Lucia. And what was most telling and repeated often in the industry was that when St. Lucia removed the requirement that you had to have a minimum net worth of $3 million US, when that was removed, Mr. Speaker, and to add to it, you didn't have to provide supporting documents, Mr. Speaker, to show that you had at least $3 million net worth. Persons started to watch the program with suspicion and started to wonder, Mr. Speaker. And then the perception continued. that St. Lucia was easy to get through, very easy to get through. That was the perception that was created, that St. Lucia had now gone to the bottom of the barrel. And then persons heard in this house and in the wider public people asking for accountability in the CIP program. And today, for the first time, we got a detailed statement of how CIP monies were spent. The law says, Mr. Speaker, the law says.
Point of order, section 33.
Section what?
The member.
Hold on.
Honorable members. Mr. Prime Minister, member for. You're standing on the point of order. So.
Mr. Speaker, the member on the opposite side, okay, is trying to convey to people wrong information. Again, we have debated this point, that the information has been in the appropriations bill and part of our budget process, clear for everyone to see, and I'm asking him again, Mr. Speaker, to please withdraw that statement, because we have proven him continuously to be wrong on that point. I have again shown it again today, and when he receives the report, each page of the budget on where the amounts are fully there for him to see. In fact, it was a process that was started by themselves, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member Kashrasal, the Prime Minister is indicating that your statement is wrong.
Mr. Speaker.
That he has provided, even before you ask the question, the details of the expenditure of CIP. Now, I do not want to interrupt you, but let me say one more thing. Remember the motion that you've brought, because I'm listening to you, but you've not gotten to your motion yet. So I'm allowing you to continue, but just take into consideration what the Prime Minister said and what I've just said. You may proceed, sir.
Mr. Speaker, if you had spoken for a couple more seconds, I would have quoted the legislation for the Prime Minister. And I will repeat my statement. The legislation requires the Minister to come to the House, indicating how much money he would earn, how the monies have been spent, and to seek the approval of the House in a direct way, Mr. Speaker. Can you quote one sitting of this House where the Prime Minister had come to seek the approval of the House for monies for the CIP? He is claiming, Mr. Speaker, that it was always in the budget. But, Mr. Speaker, let me move on. I will not get distracted. We will deal with this issue in a subsequent setting, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order, Mr. Speaker, an elucidation. I mean, Mr. Speaker, he himself now is saying that it was in the budget. There's an appropriations bill. We come to the House to debate a bill. There are several occasions in which the member can question at any time what is in the appropriations bill. We sit here at a sub-finance committee meeting. We go through the budget line by line. He has an opportunity. During the budget debate itself, he has an opportunity to seek clarification. I showed where, in fact, the amount that was going to be spent was there in the budget. I also showed him that on each page of the appropriations bill where the money was going to be spent. So to come at this point and continue to belabor a point that is wrong. In fact, for the last 3 years, they've been making false allegations against my government, Mr. Speaker. And I'm insistent that, Mr. Speaker, that he withdraw that statement, because it is wrong and it's intended to mislead the members of this House.
Honorable member, what the Prime Minister is indicating that through the budget process, where he came to this House to seek approval for the expenditure of CIP, detailed information has been given to you or given to the House, and therefore, until you could show otherwise, sir, you would have to discontinue
Mr. Speaker,
from that.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker,
just a little.
Can I refer to the legislation, Mr. Speaker? Can I refer to the legislation? The Prime Minister will not get me to withdraw a statement of fact. Mr. Speaker, if you ask me to move on, Mr. Speaker, out of respect to the Speaker, I will do so. The legislation is very clear. The Prime Minister cannot stand here and mislead the House.
Honorable member, the statement that the Prime Minister has not come to this House to seek approval for CIP expenditure. Now, the Prime Minister is indicating that he has done that on many occasions, coming to this House, seeking CIP approval, the expenditure for CIP, approval for CIP expenditure approval. That's what he's saying he has done. And he has outlined the processes by which he has done that. Okay? Now, what you're saying is that the Prime Minister has not done that. Are you still insisting that is the case, sir? Based on all what he has said that
I am insisting that he has not done so in accordance with the Act. And I am prepared to read to you the clauses in the Act that said, I will even tell you in the previous sitting what he said, why he had not done it. And then I want him to tell me which sittings of this House that he followed the legislation and came to this House and got the approval. Mr. Speaker, I want to move on, but I can cite to you the appropriate clause in the legislation, Mr. Speaker. This is a parliament, Mr. Speaker. I can read it to you if you want me to. Do you want me to read it?
No, let me see the act you're referring to.
And the National Economic Fund. The Prime Minister said there were no regulations, that's why he did not come for approval. Today he had already done it. Just that. Just that. Just that. Tell me, was that ever done, Mr. Speaker?
You want us to sit before I make a, yeah? Let Prime Minister just have a quick glance of what? You saw.
Mr. Speaker, you know, when we're going to attempt to continue to try to confuse members of the House and by virtue extension the general public, I came to the House to indicate that the Economic Fund, in fact, I'm glad the member showed it to you, Mr. Speaker, has 3 lines. And so therefore the ability to physically open up an economic fund, an account called the Economic Fund, was impossible given the state of the legislation. But indicated that my government would, when it received the monies from CIP, put them into the Accountant General, so the Consolidated Fund. And that we would follow the normal practice that any expenditure of that money would be part of the appropriations bill. Even to suggest what my good learned colleague, my very good friend, the leader of the opposition indicated, that we have to spend the money, we have to come and seek permission before. That's exactly what we have done. So, Mr. Speaker, even when I read to you that in 2015 and 16, what did the members on the upper side do? They came and they had it in the appropriations bill, broken out in terms of where they expected to spend money. They did it in 2015, 2016. They again did it in 2016 and 2017. I don't recall, Mr. Speaker, at any point when we were in the House, I don't know members who were in the House at the time can recall, that they came to the House and had a specific motion on it. It was part, and it's part of the appropriations bill.
That's right.
And therefore, Mr.
Okay,
Speaker,
Mr. Prime Minister, have you gotten back your document?
Read it. Read it. Read the 3 lines that you had for Economic Fund and tell people what you were planning on doing.
Honorable members, Honorable Member Castro South, the Prime Minister is indicating that he has followed procedure as according to him established procedures by coming to the House, table the necessary expenditure under the appropriations bill, and then his return here on other occasions to indicate to the House where the money has been spent. Your argument is that CIP requires a separate procedure in coming to this House to lay the expenditure. So it seems like, to me, in my understanding here, that the two of you, you're operating under the Act and he's operating under the Appropriations Act. And both saying almost the same thing. But the Prime Minister has just indicated that he has done it in his own way. No, what I said in his own way, I'm referring to that he has come here using the Appropriation Act to bring the expenditure before the House. That's what he has indicated he has done. Right? So from now on, good sir, honorable members, from now on, you shall not continue to make this allegation against the Prime Minister that members, that he has not laid before Parliament the appropriate expenditure for CIP. You may proceed.
Mr. Speaker, you may prevent me from saying it in this House, but I will say it in public. And I will not continue the debate to ask you what pages that have which heading. You know, in the estimates they have heading loans, bonds, sources of fund. There's none that says CIP. But Mr. Speaker, let me continue. Mr. Speaker, in this Honorable House, you've asked me not to say the Prime Minister did not come for approval. So let's proceed, Mr. Speaker. But I will say it out there in public, where I'm fully entitled to represent the people of Castries South and the people of St. Lucia. Then he shall proceed and sue me, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, I will say it differently, Mr. Speaker, that no St. Lucian can ever quote any time there was a sitting in this House and they felt comfortable with the accounts given as to how CIP monies were used. It may have been given as claimed by the Prime Minister, but the people of St. Lucia, and if you ask them, Mr. Speaker,
on a point of order, I was prepared to accept your compromise on this situation, Mr. Speaker. But the member is insisting.
Mr. Speaker, is this a point of order?
He is continuing to mislead the House. We have come, even what he just said, Mr. Speaker, where he said that it was not in the budget.
Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable Prime Minister.
In your budget right there, Mr.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Page 75.
The last statement by the Honorable Member of Castries South has not, in my mind, violated any standing orders. Just the last statement. You may proceed. Just the last.
So, Honorable Member, the day is young, Honorable Member. What survey I carried out of me? Mr. Speaker, I will also say, Mr. Speaker, because of those changes that were made, I have nothing to do with that. Mr. Speaker, because of those changes, there were serious questions being raised globally, regionally, nationally, in communities throughout St. Lucia, that there was a compromising of the due diligence processes within the CIP. And later on, Mr. Speaker, I will give examples of it, Mr. Speaker. Examples of it. Mr. Speaker, there have been people who have been approved despite regional intelligence services advising to the contrary, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that the integrity and the reputation of the CIP was severely undermined by changes made by this government. So here we are again, here today, Mr. Speaker, to make more changes. Changes that will probably sound the death knell, Mr. Speaker, of the CIP in St. Lucia. I am proposing and saying clearly, Mr. Speaker, that those changes that we are debating today will fundamentally affect the future of the CIP. So, Mr. Speaker, allow me to look at the specifics of the changes, Mr. Speaker, that are proposed today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Regulation 2. Take a look at Regulation 2. In the existing regulations, Mr. Speaker, an escrow account can only be established in St. Lucia. Only be established in St. Lucia. But, Mr. Speaker, this change now allows for an escrow account to be located outside St. Lucia. Outside St. Lucia. And when the honorable member responds, Mr. Speaker, I want him to explain to me under what conditions that would allow for an escrow account to be established outside St. Lucia. Under what conditions, Mr. Speaker? We have people, professionals, lawyers, accountants, Mr. Speaker, that operate escrow accounts in St. Lucia. By taking those monies out of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, it's affecting, Mr. Speaker, the benefits that professionals in St. Lucia can get. It's affecting, Mr. Speaker, the capitalization of our banks, Mr. Speaker. But by having those escrow accounts, no, you have one from the airport, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker,
again, I have to really stand up, Mr. Speaker, when a member is going to make an aspersions against another member of the House, and I'm asking him to withdraw that statement, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member asked me if I have an escrow account. I told him no, he has one from the airport. So what am I withdrawing? What am I withdrawing,
Mr. Prime Minister?
That's the only one you heard.
Be more specific, because you would have to tell me how the statement affects.
Mr. Speaker, the member on the opposite side is suggesting and impugning impropriety against the member from Castries South, indicating that he has an account for the airport. This is a manifestation of which the members on the opposite side spent $1 million and we're not
honorable members.
If in fact we're going to hold each other to using words like liar, then we cannot have
honorable members. Weak honorable members. Then enough, then resolve. Honorable members. Honorable member for then enough, then resolve. Honorable members, if we go into, I have always said in this House that I have no issue with member for, that I have no issue with the crosstalk. But if it is good for one side, it's also good for the other side. If we're going to make a statement on one side, we must expect the other side will drop a little pecan. So members, if we do not want crosstalk, then let's not sit and allow members to be heard in silence. Period. Okay.
You know, Mr. Speaker, to be honest, when I said about the...
Honourable member from Castries South East.
Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point of order that the member is imputing improper motive. The last time I was seated there and I made a comment and you, Mr. Speaker, asked me to withdraw, which I refused, and you asked me to leave the Honourable House, which I obliged. The member cannot stand here and say that I have an account from the airport. Where is the evidence to prove that? And if you cannot prove that I have an account from the airport, you withdraw the statement.
Honourable members, if we're going to take issue with every word that is expressed, then I suggest, honourable members, that we all remain quiet during presentations. Now, it was said to the honourable member, where is his account? He said, you have an account from the airport. On the face of it, I see nothing with the reply. Just on the face of it, it did not go far enough in my mind to indicate any improperness from the member. Let's not speculate the intent of the member. I am not going to impute. That is not my function. All he said that he has a question. Now if we start questioning every word, then it creates the wrong impression out there. Because the last time when you made a statement, you referred to when I asked you to withdraw the statement. I did not want to put it on the record because I did not want to repeat what was said.
I was seated, Mr. Speaker. The member is on his feet, and it goes down in the record that I have an account at the airport, Mr. Speaker. It goes down in the record if it is not withdrawn. So,
Honourable Member for Cass Reserve, let's not create any further issue. Let's not create any further issue because the impression is given is the wrong impression in my mind. Honourable Member, for purposes of the record of Parliament, just withdraw that statement. Don't listen to me. No. Just for the purposes of the record of Parliament, that's the part which says that you have an account at the airport. Just that little piece. You did.
I didn't, Mr. Speaker, anything you ask me to withdraw, I'll withdraw. But for a moment, I thought that the escrow for the Taiwanese loan that's been
Honourable Member.
But,
Honourable Member.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
The part where you said, or you asked, do you have an account for the airport? Just that part.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw. Anything you ask me to withdraw, Mr. Speaker.
Not honourable. Madam Clerk, please ensure that statement be struck off from our records. Continue, good.
But Mr. Speaker, there is an escrow account for the airport, for the Exim Bank of Taiwan, for the service charge. There is an escrow account. But, you're very jittery. But leave it alone, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, so this government has to tell us, why is it they are allowing for this change for escrow accounts to be established outside St. Lucia? Why? Why not in St. Lucia? Why not bring all the benefits of an escrow account to St. Lucia for our professionals to benefit from it, for our banks to benefit from it? Why outside St. Lucia? And then, where you put in it, all escrows in St. Lucia, where are they held, Mr. Speaker? Why are you putting the monies beyond the control of our courts? Why are you putting the monies beyond the eyes of St. Lucians, Mr. Speaker? And then I recall, Mr. Speaker, that it was a provision of the DSA agreement that the escrow account must be located outside St. Lucia. It was one of the clauses that St. Lucians found totally unacceptable. How is it, monies from the sale of our passports for real estate development in St. Lucia would be allowed to be established outside St. Lucia? So many of the arrangements in the CIP have been changed, including guidelines, to act against St. Lucians. For example, we had a provision where you had to be a resident for at least 5 years for you to be registered as an agent. That was changed. And we now have foreigners registering as agents. We now have developers also registering as agents. And you can go on the CIP website and see it for a fact, Mr. Speaker. We are changing the rules of the CIP to benefit a few people, Mr. Speaker, and a lot of them are foreigners, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want you to look at regulation number 10. It gets more outrageous with this government, Mr. Speaker. Number 10. Under the previous regulation, Mr. Speaker, real estate projects could have only been high-end branded hotels and high-end boutique hotels. This has been removed or amended. And read what's there. And Mr. Speaker, I don't like to, to highlight some of the errors in the drafting, because I don't want any professional to believe I am attacking them or anything like that. But sometimes you wonder, who really proofreads some of those documents that come to the House? So you really wonder, read what's there, Mr. Speaker. It has to be an error. A developer making an application to the unit for the approval of the following real estate project as a qualifying investment. A high-end branded hotel and resort. B, a high-end boutique. And what's a high-end boutique? No, well, I'm coming to C separate. What's a high-end boutique that qualifies as a real estate investment? Because previously you had a high-end boutique hotel. It now has a high-end boutique. Now surely this must be an error, because a high-end boutique, I wouldn't exactly call Hobby a high-end boutique, but you know, there are high-end boutiques. You know what a high-end boutique is. You go to Stella McCartney and those high-end boutiques in London and New York. How does a high-end boutique become a real estate qualifying investment? So surely B has to be an error. And somebody did not proofread this properly. But more disturbing, Mr. Speaker, is C. And listen to C. Any other project that the minister, on the recommendation of the unit and after consultation with cabinet, considers necessary, any other project. It means now somebody can build a house somewhere in St. Lucia and can apply for it to be CIP qualifying investment. Any other project. The purpose of being specific is to ensure that persons know there's a level playing field. Now, Mr. Speaker, the member from Castle South is continuing. And when I respond, Mr. Speaker, he gets thin skin. Please advise the member from Castle South is to not cause me to answer his taunts. Okay, so you know you are specific because persons know with certainty what it is that can qualify for real estate. When you put in a blanket provision, any other project that the minister, on the recommendation of the unit, and I'm very suspicious of the unit, deems necessary, it means anybody can submit any project and it becomes CIP. Why is that necessary? Well, you say that's not what it is, but if that's not what it is, that's why you have specificity. You have it specific, so you know exactly what it seeks to address. But if you leave it open-ended, saying any other project, if you do not want it to be any other project, don't say any other project. Say complexes, say horse riding stables. Say specify it. But if you leave it open-ended, it means any other thing can qualify. But then the Prime Minister had announced that DSH is a CIP project. And he had said that he would be upfronting monies and then he would get it back at the back end from CIP. We were also told, and every time we have a debate in this House on CIP.
Standing on the point of order again, the member is again trying to mislead the House. DSH, and we've repeatedly said that, is not an approved CIP project and has not even put in an application to be a CIP project. And so therefore, again, I would like him to please correct that statement.
CIP is not a CIP, DSH is not a CIP approved project.
Mr. Speaker, and if you allow me, I will play the television clipping where the Prime Minister said that the CIP, the DSH is a CIP project. If he's now telling us that he was wrong when he said that it's not now a CIP, I'll proceed. But Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member, if you saw a news broadcast of one thing, that's one thing. Then you need to see that you saw. So the House is not misled to believe that what you're saying is something that is policy statement by the government. You understand? So I'm saying to you that he's saying that CIP is not an approved, DSH, is not an approved CIP project, and there has not even been an application.
Mr. Speaker,
so we in this House must take whatever is said right here in this House as the fact.
Oh, in
in the House.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the guidance. Like you told me, I must see that I saw it is an approved project, and I have not seen the document in the House. I heard it, but you've advised me it's not what I hear, it's what I see.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much.
But I will play the clip elsewhere, Mr. Speaker. So, I'm wondering, if DSH is not approved, as the Prime Minister said, how could DSH have been approved? Because under the old regulations, it says 2. High-end branded resorts, high-end branded boutique hotels. So DSH could not be approved, no? So this now will allow for DSH to be approved. Is that what you're saying, Prime Minister? Because DSH could not have been approved under the previous provisions. It could not have been approved. And I didn't see that I saw it, but I heard it. So obviously, is this being done to facilitate?
Speaker, on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, this is becoming...
The member again is trying to, mislead the House again, Mr. Speaker. In fact, if he wants to know, DSH project does have 3 high-end boutique properties and could qualify. But all we have to do is to stick to what the facts are. Currently, DSH has not applied and is not a registered CIP project. So he can make his points as to what he thinks the errors are in broadening the bandwidth. That's his prerogative, and we will debate that point. But to bring other members in here and to try to suggest untruths, okay, is misleading the House and misleading the general public, Mr. Speaker.
Member South.
This has become a bit comical.
Honorable Member, refrain from saying that DSH is a approved CIP project. As far as has been made clear to this House, DSH is not.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Speaker. Can I say the horse racing track is CIP approved? No? I can't say that either? Okay. Will this allow the horse racing track to become CIP approved? Yes, will this allow, and you'll respond, I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, will this change allow the horse racing track to now become CIP approved? And since DSH has 3 high-end branded resorts as part of it, I look forward to its approval and for it to become the Pearl of the Caribbean and transform Beaufort from being a ghetto to delivering solve and hope, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, Regulation 10 is highly dangerous. By having such a broad, all-embracing provision, it means just about any project can now qualify as a real estate project. If the government did not intend for that to happen, they would provide specific economic activity that can qualify. Under the regulations, you will see under enterprise a list of about 9 areas that can qualify. And you will be told, Mr. Speaker, that if you leave it broad-ended like this, it can be subject to serious abuse. Mr. Speaker, let's look at Schedule 1, Mr. Speaker. Let's move on to page 128, Schedule 1, Mr. Speaker. The government is making the CIP cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Already we had major problems with reducing the donation level to 100,000. But hear what this government is doing, Mr. Speaker. Hear what they're doing. Before, Mr. Speaker, every applicant had to pay a processing fee. Every applicant had to pay a processing fee. Now, Mr. Speaker, real estate applicants do not have to pay a processing fee. Do not have to pay. Prime Minister is looking at me surprised. When you read it, Mr. Speaker, 5A says, by deleting the words for non-refundable processing fees and replacing the words for non-refundable processing fees, open bracket, not applicable for an applicant who intends to make an investment in an approved real estate project. So we are now exempting all Galaxy applicants from paying a processing fee. we're now exempting all future DSH applicants from paying a processing fee. So I'm asking, why are we doing this? But it gets even worse, Mr. Speaker. It gets worse. In the real estate option, whereas government does not get the qualifying investment, the applicants are required to pay a fee to government. It's called administration fee. So you apply, you pay a processing fee, and then you pay an administration fee. Listen, the regulation that existed, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member Catherine, so not wanting to stop your presentation, interrupt your presentation at all. But you realize in your motion, you only made reference to Regulation 2 and 10. Just the two. Because the other regulations are not in any way subject to our debate. Okay? So I'm just take it, put in your notice.
So, Mr. Speaker,
again on a point of order.
Again, on a point of order on you, Mr. Speaker.
The member is reading. See, this is the problem, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Prime Minister, let's.
The problem is the member is reading Section 5, where it says Schedule 1 of the Principal Regulations is amended. And he says that in A, deleting the words for non-refundable processing fees and replacing the words for non-replaceable processing fees, not applicable for an applicant who intends to make an investment in a approved real estate project. And he stopped at that point. The next section says, by deleting item 5, non-refundable administrative fees applicable for the approved real estate project or enterprise, and its contents is replaced as follows. Applicant applying for a loan, $50,000. Each qualifying dependent, $25,000. Each qualifying dependent, $35,000.
Yes, so I'm now saying to you that your motion does not deal with any order of the regulation, but just two. Regulations 2 and Regulations 10. Okay? So, but you've going beyond what?
Quite on the contrary, Mr. Speaker. Quite on the contrary. Maybe if you had allowed me to finish, you would understand the point I was making, Mr. Speaker. And with all due respect, let me finish the point, Mr. Speaker. The Negate regulation says to reinstate the 2. I have never asked to reinstate the fees. I was pointing out to the Honorable House the consequence of the changes that the government is making. I had never asked that they be reinstated. The government can decide whatever fees they want to charge. I don't support it, but Regulation 2 and 10, I think, should be reinstated for the sake of the integrity of the program. But you could charge whatever fees you want. That's a policy decision. So I didn't ask to reinstate the fees. I was just pointing out the changes that were being made in the regulations. But let me answer the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is on a point of order. This is becoming almost comical. The Prime Minister is not even reading.
He's not asking you a question.
Sorry?
He stood on a point of order. You make your presentation.
Yeah, he's wrong, Mr. Speaker.
Make your presentation.
I said the government removed the processing fee. It has removed it. The processing fee. Mr. Speaker, what the Prime Minister is referring to is the administration fee. And I am saying you remove before. And you want me to cite the regulations? I can go and find it and tell you. Under the regulations, there was a standard processing fee under the Schedule 4. Every applicant paid the processing fee. Every applicant. Once you apply to the CIP, you have to pay the processing fee. Standard. That has been moved for real estate. Okay, Prime Minister.
You have to cite it.
So, Mr. Speaker, and you know, Mr. Speaker, if I am wrong, I'm prepared to you know, amend and accept that. Mr. Speaker, on Schedule 1.3.16 has a table that says non-refundable processing fee. Non-refundable processing fee. It's there. This says,
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker,
please make your presentation.
This says to change the words and to add not applicable for an applicant who intends to make an investment in an approved real estate project. It means the non-refundable processing fee does not apply for people applying for real estate. Now, right. And that's where I'll show you how ridiculous it is what you're doing. You say you replace it with this. You're not replacing it. You are amending what exists. Because here what exists. Here what exists, Mr. Speaker. And that's why I want to show this government is doing things. It says on the original that you pay 50,000 US administration fee. This changes it to how much, Mr. Speaker? To 40,000. So whereas before the government of St. Lucia was making 50,000 US dollars fees, this changes it to 40,000. That's 40,000 is less than 50. So you remove the administration fee, the administration fee, the processing fee, and the administration fee is even decreased. It's even decreased. It was 50,000, Mr. Prime Minister. There it is. Can I make copies available for the Honorable House? It is now 40,000, 45,000. It goes further, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order again. It is in the statutory instrument. Nobody was trying to deceive anyone.
I don't remember.
I agree with the member that the quantum of the fee has been changed. The name, instead of being an application, we're calling it an administrative fee. There's no additional fees. One replaces the other, and there was a reduction in the fee. We're all here to bid. Nobody's trying to hide that. It's right here in the SI, Mr. Speaker. We've showed what the old price was and what the new price was, and has retermed it to be administrative to combine the two, because I had one administrative fee and one processing fee on two different programs, and we just merged them and harmonized them, Mr. Speaker. But there's been no attempt at any point to reduce it substantially more than what we have indicated here, and we have admitted, we've come to the House and asked for those fees to be reduced, and when it's our time to debate, we will provide the evidence as why we have done that. But furthermore, Mr. Speaker, your first ruling was correct. This is not included in his motion.
Mr. Speaker, maybe there's something wrong in the way I'm saying it, so maybe I'll try and say it differently. Maybe. The regulations provide, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, under Schedule 2, I think, Mr. Speaker, a non-refundable processing fee. Let's go over it again. Every single person who applies pays the non-refundable processing fee. Whether you qualify or you don't qualify, you pay the processing fee. Everyone. This changes it to say it is not applicable to people applying for real estate options. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is the non-refundable processing fee applies to everybody else but the real estate applicants. Does that make sense, Mr. Speaker? It applies to everyone else. This goes further, Mr. Speaker. It goes further, and it changes the administration fee. The administration fee for real estate, Mr. Speaker, is that when you apply for citizenship, you are supposed to provide a qualified investment. You buy shares or whatever you do. That money does not go to the government of St. Lucia. What the government of St. Lucia gets is the administration fee. With the donation, it comes straight to the government. But under real estate, we make the money from the administration fee. What this does, Mr. Speaker, is to reduce the administration fee. So already you've taken out the processing fee for real estate applicants, and now you are reducing the administration fee for real estate. So real estate applicants like Galaxy and a future project, Mr. Speaker, will pay considerably less to the government of St. Lucia. So we're not paying administrative fee when it's real estate, and you're paying reduced administration fee, and you're not paying the processing fee, Mr. Speaker. That is the point that is being made. That is the point. The Prime Minister doesn't even understand the changes that have been made, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am not asking the government to reinstate the fees. I am not. That's their policy decision. I think it's a bad policy decision, but it's the Prime Minister's policy decision. Let's look at Mr. Speaker's schedule.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of order again. Honestly, I really genuinely believe that the member from Castries South believes that all of us, right, are incomprehensible, are incapable of understanding what he is saying. Mr. Speaker, all we have done is that there are two terms, administrative fee and application fee. In the case of real estate, if he looks at his own regulations, he will see that the application fee applied specifically to donations and to real estate. In the case of enterprises has both an application and administrative fee. All we have done is harmonize the application fee and the administrative fee into one. And what used to be $50,000 as the application fee plus the administrative fee is now $30,000. To suggest anything other than that, Mr. Speaker, is deliberately attempting to mislead this House and by virtue the public of this country. And while we may have a debate as to whether it makes sense to reduce the amount or not, that is subject to our interpretation. But the fact is the amount was reduced, and all that happened is two terms were merged together, but the fee has only come from $50,000 to $30,000. To suggest that all of a sudden the $50,000 that existed before under the application, okay, the application fee is zero, and therefore all the person now has to pay is the administrative fee, and therefore it was 50 and 30. That's wrong. There was never an administrative fee when you had to make an application under the real estate. There was no administrative fee. All there was an application fee. And all we've done is merge the application and administrative into one so that it's consistent on all the programs and laid out for everybody to see what the fees are. And yes, we have reduced the fees, and when it comes our term to respond, to rebut the members on the other side, we will clarify as to why the government went down that road.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is reaching...
Honourable member, just continue.
No, I am continuing, Mr. Speaker. I am continuing. When a member stands up and says to you, all we did was harmonize the two fees. So we took 50 and we took 2, we harmonize it, and it's now 30. You harmonize it. You make 2 fees 1 fee, but it's 40% less. How do you harmonize?
Honourable member.
Yeah, I am making my contribution, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, this is not a point of order, but let's proceed, Mr. Speaker. But can I explain why there is a need to have the non-refundable processing fee separate? There is a reason. Because somebody might apply, you go through the entire administrative process with that person, and if they fail due diligence, you reject it. But you would have spent monies, administrative costs, to process that person.
Mr. Speaker, and again on a point of order. If in fact now the member is coming with a different argument as to whether in fact the terms of either an application or processing fee...
He said he's standing on a point of order, so you yield immediate point of order. So indicate.
If in fact now the argument now is not about what the clarification is, but now whether in fact it's non-refundable, both fees are non-refundable. So that to go down that point is again attempting to mislead this House and the general public.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is dead wrong. Both are not refundable.
Honourable members, make a point, present your motion. I know you've been interrupted by point of orders, but make your presentation and let's continue.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a very tolerant and respectful person in this House. I've been interrupted repeatedly with points that are not points of order, and you are now seeking to prevent me from responding to the outrageous points that have been made. At least allow me to clarify the points of interjection, Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, let's proceed. I am told, Mr. Speaker, that you take processing fee and administration fee and you harmonize it, but yes, it is reduced. The non-processing fee has a purpose. It is the administrative cost of processing an applicant. If that applicant fails due diligence, the application goes out of the window, but you've had your processing fee paid to you. If that person qualifies and that person is asked to make their qualifying investment, they also pay you the administration fee. And that is how government earns its revenue. The effect of that change, Mr. Speaker, is to reduce the income that the people of St. Lucia will get from the CIP for real estate. To reduce the income that the people of St. Lucia will get. And it makes it cheaper for those persons that have been given CIP approval for their real estate projects, namely Galaxy and a future project in the south, Mr. Speaker. I'm not allowed to mention the name anymore in this house, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want you to read, Mr. Speaker, and I need clarification on this, Mr. Speaker. Amendment of Schedule 5. It says Schedule 5 of the principal regulations is amended by deleting Form 10 and replacing the following. Certainly on my regulations, I do not see, maybe there is, and I missed it, so I would like the House to provide me with a copy of the Form 10 that's been deleted, because certainly I could not find it online on the CIP website or in my own documents, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, there's a simple point that's been made and why we're asking that the regulations be reinstated. Because, Mr. Speaker, the CIP has been decimated and vulgarized by this government, Mr. Speaker. The image of St. Lucia has been tainted by what's happening in the CIP, Mr. Speaker. And I say to you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to make the point here, and usually when we have debates here in this honorable house, documents come from the CIP unit quick, Mr. Speaker, in an attempt to counter me. There has to be an investigation in the operations of the unit. I'm saying it loud and clear. There has to be an investigation in the operations of the CIP unit. Has to be. Because, Mr. Speaker, somebody has to explain why is staff fired when they are insisting on proper due diligence at the CIP, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not going to mention staff members' name and the circumstances, what's not, Mr. Speaker. But the Prime Minister loves investigations, Mr. Speaker.
What's the point of order, Mr.
We're impugning the names of people who are not even here to defend themselves.
There's no names called as yet, Mr. President. There's no names called here.
I said I will not mention names.
There's how many people are working on
I don't know you.
A very narrow group of people, and questioning the integrity. If in fact that he has concerns about what's going on, there are mechanisms to do that. But to come to this house, Mr. Speaker, and impugn the ill reputation of people who are not here to defend themselves is wrong.
No, Mr. Prime Minister, I disagree on this point here. The House here, Mr. Prime Minister, is the ideal place for us to question what happening in various bodies of the state, sir. You understand? So, yeah.
Mr. Speaker, I will repeat it. I will repeat it. Somebody insisted on proper due diligence and the person was fired. I'll repeat it, Mr. Speaker. And the person that usually sends the notes from CIP can send a note to the contrary. But Mr. Speaker, there is presently over the next few days an upcoming audit.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
An upcoming audit by the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. And I sat in here in a briefing in this chamber on that upcoming audit. And I can say to you, Mr. Speaker, the actions of this government in relation to the CIP has put St. Lucia at the center of scrutiny because of the actions of this government in relation to the CIP. And the Prime Minister will say, wow, but can he deny, Mr. Speaker, that they are already doing practice interview sessions, Mr. Speaker, and the CIP is one of those that the practices are taking place. Now, somebody might say, that's normal. Maybe it's normal. There's one bank that handles CIP in St. Lucia, Bank of St. Lucia, one, Mr. Speaker. And the Prime Minister has to assure this nation that when the audit is finished, that there will not be a stain on St. Lucia, we will not be blacklisted. Because if we are, there will be no bank in St. Lucia handling CIP. And it is primarily because of those changes that this government has made to the regulations. It has undermined the integrity. It has undermined any sense of comfort that St. Lucia is managing this program properly, Mr. Speaker. And the members opposite, Mr. Speaker, boast about the CIP and how well it's doing. Let me just share some figures with you, Mr. Speaker. Do you know St. Kitts, between 2007 and 2016, in about 10 years, made $1.78 billion EC from the CIP? $1.78 billion from the CIP. The St. Kitts government, in October 2017, after this government made the changes that the Prime Minister said would make us more attractive, in October 2017, the government of St. Kitts launched a special program within the CIP for 6 months. And Mr. Speaker, it made $480 million in 6 months. And St. Kitts is higher, cost higher than St. Lucia. No. St. Kitts, that program, Mr. Speaker, that program, Mr. Speaker, the St. Kitts government introduced the Hurricane Relief Fund, HRF, in October 2017, and this scheme ran for 6 months until March 31st, 2018, requiring reduced 150,000 contribution, replacing the SIDF. The government disclosed 1,200 applications received under the scheme, bringing in $480 million EC dollars. Mr. Speaker, we reduced our donation from 200,000 to 100,000. We couldn't even make 50 million, Mr. Speaker. St. Kitts in 6 months made 480, and you're telling me you've made our program the most desirable program, Mr. Speaker. Dominica, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister of Dominica, 2 months ago, delivered his budget. Dominica is the same price. We will reduce to be same price with Dominica. Dominica is expected to earn 417 million in non-tax revenues from the CIP for 2019-2020. We budget 65. Dominica will receive 417 million. That does not even include real estate investments, the housing program where Dominica is building 5,000 houses for its citizens, and an airport development fund. Dominica every month is saving a percentage of the CIP to build a brand new airport. All of that is not included in the $417 million they will make in this financial year. But we boast, the Prime Minister boasts, together with his Minister of Tourism, that this is the best program and they've made so much money. But Mr. Speaker and Prime Minister, I need to ask you, have you made the CIP more transparent? No, you've not. No, you've not. There are more questions about the function of the CIP. Did you ever appoint a board representing civil society like you said? No. Same political appointees. And Mr. Speaker, there will always be the question asked and the suspicion whether or not there is political interference in the decision-making of the CIP. That will always linger. And as long as that lingers, Mr. Speaker, there will always be questions about the integrity of St. Lucia. And I put it to you, and as the motion states, Regulation 2 and 10 should be reinstated. We continue to chip away at the image of St. Lucia and the reputation of St. Lucia. And for the sake of our CIP and the sake of St. Lucia, can we reinstate the regulations? You may change your fees how you want. You may reduce them, you might harmonize them, and in harmonizing them they are reduced accidentally or whatever, but ensure the reputation of the CIP and of St. Lucia. Thank you very much.